Hey everybody, welcome back to East Oak Studio. We're so excited. We have a special guest tonight. Tonight we're going to actually be painting my mom. So Miss Lisa Carr, she's going to be up on the model stand this evening. We have some lovely reference images for y'all to upload. If you're new to East Oaks and this site, just know that in the link in the comments below you can find a link. And that link will take you to a place you can submit your email, and you'll have access to not only these images, but all the images from the PFLs or the Painting from Life videos in the past. So please paint along with this. We do this so that you can ask us questions and participate with us if you wish. We'd love for y'all to paint along, ask us questions, tell us where you're from. Evie, our artist in resident, is behind the computer tonight, and our painters this evening is Alex Venezia and Erica Arcudi, and we are super excited about having both of them here. And without further ado, we are going to get started. So make sure to ask us questions. We want to have conversation with you. So looking forward to having y'all with us this evening. Ready to go?
Good to go.
All right. So, believe it or not, it is my mother's birthday today. We are so excited. She turns 35. And, you know, it's a celebrated birthday for sure, because how often do you turn 35? Like 2, 3 times? You know, so she might have turned 35, but she looks 20. So I'm trying to say all the right things, you know. While she's here, maybe she'll cook a good meal for me while I'm here, you know. I say the right stuff. But we were talking earlier, and Evie asked me how many times I've painted my mom, and this is the very first time, so it's a special occasion. Alex, have you ever painted your mom?
Nope.
Am I opening a can of worms by asking?
No. No, I don't think so.
It's so funny when you get kind of caught up and started in your career, like when you feel like you're good enough to actually paint your family at the, you know, well enough to where it's worthy of their beauty, then all of a sudden you're actually trying to make a living. So it's fun to be able to do like overlaps like this.
Yeah, my grandpa would pose for me when I was just learning, so that was cool. I
Yeah,
painted
that's
him
awesome.
a couple times, but my mom, no. I don't think she would sit still.
Yeah, I tell you, you know, we have models that come in here for the first time. They get so excited, but then after they model once, they're like, "Yeah, I'm okay not doing that again." it gets a little tiring. It's a challenging role to stay in the same position for so long. So Eric and I were talking earlier, and she is an instructor with Florence Academy. She is helping as one of the instructors, one of the main instructors for their master's program that they just started. This is their first year doing it, right, Erica?
This is their second year. They
their
started
second year.
Yes, they started
Oh,
last
okay.
year, and then so now we have first years and second years. It's a 3-year program, and I was part of the online cohort.
That's just awesome. So Erica, we've said this before, but for anyone who's new, you know, she was teaching in Florence for several years. She was a student at Florence Academy, and then decided that she loved Italy so much that she was going to stay over there, and they invited her to be an instructor, and now we are fortunate and lucky to have her back in Raleigh. She's a native Raleighan, and you know, a lot of people don't go back to their hometown, so we're really excited that she decided to come back.
North Carolina.
Woo!
So we've got a couple of folks logging on and saying hi. Zaid Anwar asks, can you guys do some more portrait painting tutorials on eStoke Studio?
Oh, yeah. Actually, I'm trying to put together right now a film of a self-portrait. Still haven't started it yet, but it's going to be starting soon, where I will then go through the process of painting a self-portrait. So right now I'm trying to work out the camera angles and how it's going to look with making sure that you get a good vantage point while I'm painting it.
But you just keep breaking the mirrors, that's the problem.
Which is actually not too far from the truth.
Yeah, there is a broken mirror in there.
I totally had a friend who was renovating their home, and they were doing their bathroom, and they had this huge wall mirror, and I was like, oh, this would be perfect. They're like, yeah, we were just going to get rid of it. We don't know what to do with it. And I was like, well, I'll come. And they said, well, we kind of cracked it. Is that okay? And I said, sure. How big is it? And they're like, oh, it's like 6 feet, 6.5 feet by 4 feet. I was like, oh, that's plenty. I'll just come and cut it, with like a little glass cutter. And so I went on, looked at some YouTube videos of how to cut glass, and went out there and got a cheap cutter, thinking that it was going to be all right. And I tried cutting it the first time, and then it the glass split all the way up. And I was like, oh, so it went half. So I was like, okay, well, I still have half. So then I tried again, and I cut it another way, and then it cut it into a quarter by accident. And by that point, I was so discouraged, and at that point, I was at 14 years of bad luck. So I was like, you know what? I'm just going to take it as it is and take it somewhere to get cut. So.
Oh, okay. So that's the piece that's in the garage.
That's the broken piece of glass mirror in the garage that I was going to use as my self-portrait piece.
Yeah, because I remember you describing it as bigger. And I was like, oh.
Yeah, yeah. Well, you really isn't that big.
Yeah. You could still get a good size out of it.
I'm hoping so.
Louis, really quick, we had somebody who was asking about the model images being available. Do you know if those are up yet?
I sent them to Kelly. They should be up very shortly. If you look in the details of the show description, they should have a link for it. If it's not there yet, keep refreshing your website every couple of minutes, and I'll make sure to shoot her a text to make sure she's got that taken care of.
Okay, so everybody who's needing reference images, if they're not up, they will be up very, very shortly. Sorry for the delay. And we have a couple of more folks who've logged on. Adam Raziz says, hi guys. And Joy Calhoun says, hey from Florida. And Zaid Anwar asks another question. What's the number one thing an artist can do for improving their portraits aside from painting lots of them?
I personally would say that you need to get really good at drawing. And what I mean by drawing is understanding proportion, angles, and knowing how to mimic shape really well. That will get you to being able to do a portrait much faster than almost anything else. Anybody else like to add to that?
To connect with that, probably a little bit of anatomy. I would start with the skull, so you know the major forms that you see, what a jawbone looks like, cheekbones, forehead, eye sockets, just overall skull shape. That's really helpful. Often people get caught in the beautiful rendering of an eyeball, but if it's not sitting in the eye socket, then
Yep.
it kind of starts to take away from the psychology and emotion that you want to paint, character in a portrait. So understanding those basic pieces of anatomy, starting with the skull and then kind of building on top of that, is really useful.
So I'm curious, with our model today has a lovely, lovely hat on, which makes me think, do y'all have any recommendations for people on painting from life with accessories? Like how do you try to portray a model with accessories on in a way that prioritizes them but also doesn't detract from their facial features?
That sounds like a good question for Alex.
Well, I don't know if this completely answers it, but definitely looking at a hierarchy of edges, because usually whatever the accessory is has a lot of, or the edge quality will be a lot different than the flesh. And sometimes when we're just painting flesh, we can get away with some hard edges and stuff everywhere, but let's say with this hat, I'm looking at the brim, and that's like the light, and then the shadow it's casting is super sharp, and that in comparison to the features on the face are super, the features look really soft in comparison, so keeping all of that in mind.
Yeah.
Piggybacking off of that, understanding your focal areas where you want the viewer to look and stay, and then everything else, contrast or edgewise, has to be in support of that focal area. So that'll help you not have too much information and accessories when you want the focus to be on the face, for example. But how do you actually see that? It's useful to look at your subject in that focal area and then really paying attention to what's happening in your peripheral vision and taking some time to observe how things are relating to that focal area.
That's good.
So Alex just mentioned the phrase hierarchy of edges. For some folks who may not know what that means, could you clarify and also maybe go into a little bit of detail on tips and tricks to achieve that in such early stages of painting?
Yeah, so to clarify it, I mean, if you look at looking at a painting that you like, there's just a variety of where one thing overlaps another, or something against the background, and it'll have, a hard or a soft edge or somewhere in between, and getting that from like razor sharp to, just a cloudy softness. And there is kind of a way to find really sharp edges in whatever we look at, but when focusing on something that has a lot of moving parts, if we just zoom in on everything one at a time, the hierarchy won't be there. So like when I'm kind of, let's say, squinting at this or even just looking at it, there's things in the hat that are really sharp, like I said, the brim and then the kind of like petals of the flower. And in comparison, making some of the shadows and stuff in the face look really nice, light and soft. And so I guess a way of achieving that, I mean, there's different brushes that can make that easier, make a sharp edge easier or a soft edge easier. Yeah, I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
So a lot of kind of flat, I have these kind of Eclipse brushes from Rosemary that have this nice flat edge to it, and they're really thin, so I can make like a razor sharp edge with that. And then something more broad, like a filbert or something, can maybe make a soft edge, but it's also a value thing.
Mm-hmm.
If you have a high contrast, it tends to look more like a hard edge. And if you can kind of get away with painting hard edges and make it look soft if there's a lot of values next to each other that are really close in value.
I always think of hierarchy as like, even in like value, you've got a scale of like 1 to 10, you know, and so like light being 10, like white, and then black being 0, that's sort of a hierarchy of value. And there's also a hierarchy of edges, and you're trying to think of like, well, if the softest of soft edges is a 0 and the hardest of hard edges is a 10, then which is like super razor sharp, and I'm trying to make whatever thing be the accent or the main focus of a piece needs to have some sharp edges in order for my eye to be drawn there, then it needs to be closer in the 10 range, and then everything else needs to be lesser and softer than that. And so sometimes it's kind of creating balance between where you want the viewer's eye to go. It's just kind of a way I think of it. You know, there's area, and like Alex was saying, sometimes knowing where some of those things should go, which is like making things feel soft that should be soft in order for it to create an aesthetic beauty. That's important, you know, to know where to make things. Like the contrast is also a hierarchy where you want to like a scale of 1 to 10 for the contrast as well, you know.
So Nadini Narashiman says, hi from London. Joyce Kramalchnik says, she looks like a wonderful model. Can't wait to paint her. I think all of us here agree. And Zaid asked another question. Have you guys heard about Nick Alm, the Swedish artist? If so, what do you think about his art?
I'm amazed at how he can do watercolor and oil and like every medium and somehow
isn't that the truth?
Have like a proficiency in light effect and edges and everything in all the media, it seems.
Yeah.
Nick Alm was one of the very first people I met in the art world. It was the first time I had ever gone to a Portrait Society convention, and he was a finalist, and he didn't know anybody, and I didn't know anybody, and he looked like, I actually walked up to him, he kind of looked like he didn't know anybody, and so I was like, hey, you kind of look like you're in the same boat I am. Is this your first time? And he said, yeah, and I was like, well, let's hang out. And so for the rest of the weekend, he and I and Teresa Oaxaca hung out the whole time. And this was before he was as known as he is now. And you know, he was a really, really nice guy. And I agree with Erica. I think his ability to be able to paint in multiple mediums and it still feel like his work is pretty incredible. So, but I think he's teaching it, or just got done teaching at Yorkshire, a workshop there. All right, everybody. Well, look, we're going to take a quick 5-minute break, and we will be back shortly, and we'll see you in a minute.
You're so still.
All right, everybody, we're back. Session 2.
Yeah, perfect. Right back in it. I'm quickly learning that my mom's a naturalist. She might be modeling a lot for me from now on.
So Michael Gallo asks, is doing master copies of portrait paintings helpful in portrait painting if you don't have access to a model, or do you advise not using two-dimensional source for practicing portrait paintings?
Master copies are great.
I agree.
So useful.
Yeah. I wish I did more.
I was teaching my students for this master's program. They were doing Edefelt figure paint copies, master copies in paint, and I was just thinking while I was teaching, I'm like, I should do these. I should do these myself.
Yeah.
These are so useful.
Yeah, totally.
So I guess kind of along that vein, when you're embarking on a master copy, what are some of the things that are helpful to look for in picking the painting that you want to copy?
Well, somebody that inspires you.
Yeah.
You know, a lot of times your art is influenced by the people that you love to look at, and so if you see something, you're like, I want to know how they painted this way, or how they painted. You know, if there's artists that are like that, then go and do a deep dive research of exactly what they were doing and start incorporating a little bit in your work. And by mimicking their master, or doing a master copy of their work, then it'll help you get a lot closer to understanding how they were doing their work. So.
Hey, Lou,
Yeah.
you might need to adjust your mic.
I was hitting
It's, yeah, I think it's just rubbing up on the collar.
Yep. My beard's getting so long, it keeps hitting the mic. No.
Yeah, that's a good way also to find out if there's something about an artist that you like and you don't know what it is. Yeah, I remember one master copy I did start in a museum. I couldn't believe the amount of red I had to put in the cheeks to get it to match what I was looking at. I was like, wait, really? More red? Okay.
That's good.
But then it takes you to like that uncomfortable place out of your comfort zone. You learn something new.
Mm-hmm.
I think actually approaching it from that point of view of like, what do I want to learn? And then finding work that can correspond with that.
Yeah. And if you're a beginner, maybe pick something that has shadow shapes
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
and a bit contrasted, not like a outdoor bouguereau or something, because you will want to rip
That might
your
feel
hair out.
overwhelming.
That's the truth.
We've got some folks on here from Ireland. Marcella M says hi from Waterford. And Keith Anderson asks, hi from Ireland. I'm a self-taught portrait artist. I work from photos. Have the guys any advice on how I can get my name out there to help build more of a client base? Thank you.
Well, the way I started is you know, you'd be amazed at how far generosity goes. If you have a friend or a couple of friends that that you would find interesting to paint, or maybe you're interested in doing more family portrait stuff like I do, and painting them, and you really would be amazed at how fast the word travels that this is what you do, you know, especially with things like social media. And the next thing you know, you'll have a lot of people asking if you could do family members of theirs. You know, if you're doing corporate work, people need to see that you can do what you say you're going to do. They don't have much imagination past what you've already painted. So if you're painting children but you're wanting to actually do corporate work, they really can't see past the fact that you only paint children, or only have children in your portfolio. So, so that would be one thing that I would say is helpful, is just help other people, and then all of a sudden you'll realize that it comes back to you tenfold.
And Zaid asks, is it easier to paint on a canvas or a wood panel? What's the difference between them?
Well, there's a lot of differences between them in the sense that how your brush presses against a canvas or a panel. I think that it really comes down to what you enjoy painting on. There's other reasons why I paint on panel, which is, number one, is it's more, the longevity of your painting will last longer, in addition to the fact that it's more inexpensive to paint on. So economically, it just makes sense. And on top of that, I've gotten used to how my brush moves on a panel. So, but as far as the properties that are different, you know, there's no spring to a panel. So because there's no spring to it, you've got to get used to how your brush presses up against it. But then, depending on what you use as your foundation layer, like, you know, are you using a lead ground or an acrylic ground, is also going to change how the paint sort of slides across it. So, and how rough you make the surface. I mean, there's so many things that are separate from just the fact that it's a panel.
I'm actually painting on canvas glued to a panel, so
Hey, see,
there you go.
talk about that.
For a while I've been, this was half because it was available and half when I was prepping for today, and half because I felt like my mark making was really sharp in my previous painting from life, and so I'm painting on a more textured surface relative to the previous one I was painting on, because it kind of just disperses your brush stroke a bit if you have the weave of the canvas, and so things can be a little bit softer.
Yeah, I know one thing that Lewis taught me when I started my mentorship is that you can take a piece of scrap canvas and make an impression of the weave structure into the gesso on a panel if you kind of want to achieve the texture of painting on canvas, but you still want to retain the stability of a panel.
You stole my trick, didn't even credit me, Louie.
Yeah. That was most certainly an Alex, just to go ahead and give that credit. That was most certainly an Alex move. I
Come
was,
on.
Copyright Alex Venezia 2022.
Alex, I merely stand on the shoulders of giants.
I forgive you. No way.
I was half concentrating and half listening, and then like once you said that, I was like, wait, what did she? Oh.
And just to offer another little bit of 2 cents there, in addition to painting, I have a background in textiles, and the absorbency of different fibers is very, very different. So if you're working on like kind of a cheapo cotton duck canvas, which is like the kind that you'll commonly find in like an art supply store, that's going to soak up a lot more paint way more quickly than working on a textile that has a lesser absorbency rate like linen. So if you've never tried linen and you like canvas, then give it a shot.
Do it. Try all the things.
So Marcella is a little late to the party, and she was asking if you guys could reintroduce yourselves really quickly.
Sure. So I'm Lewis Carr, and next to me is Alex Venezia and Eric Arcudi. We should like have on our show notes like who's painting.
Sounds like a plan.
And Eric Arcudi. We're all, the three of us are painting, and my wonderful sweet mother is modeling for us, Lisa Carr, on her birthday.
All right, we're about to just...
Or we could just like give you like, hello, my name is, like name tags on your palettes. So in these first stages of laying down your composition, do you guys have any tips that you can give to people for keying in your values?
I like to make notes on my canvas before committing, so I'll just take my palette knife, make a little dot in an area, such as the background, trying to understand the value relationships right now for her, the shadows on her forehead versus her hair versus her background versus her dress and then her skin. And so I want to make little notes before I cover the canvas. That way I do less repainting and I can judge and I can change everything on the palette before having to script things off on the panel.
Yeah, I would say for me, what I'm doing right now is I kind of start and find my darkest dark. And I like to punch that in so that, because for me that's kind of the easiest truth to find first, and then I can kind of compare off of that. And then another smart thing would be to find the easiest color that you think you could get accurate, the easiest, and kind of place that down, and then you can start to judge off of those things.
That's good. Starting with your darkest dark in your lightest light is just always a really great place to start as far as keying.
Maybe I'll add some lightest light on there.
Marcella asks, Lewis, are you using a comber brush along with the round brushes?
Yeah, I'm using a flat Eclipse long flat brush, a number 6, and I'm using a round bristle brush that is made by Berlin. It's just one that I got at Jerry's as sort of an eraser, and it's just kind of how I start when I'm like working on the drawing of the painting. And I do a lot, at the very beginning, I do a lot of like erasing, drawing, adding to kind of find a drawing and then go from there. Up, I'm concentrating a lot, you know, stakes are high here.
So that brings up a question that I have. Do you ever feel that your relationship with a model or a subject can impact the way that you paint them? Like, if you're painting somebody that you've only just met, does that maybe affect your process a little bit differently as opposed to, say, today painting your mom?
Well, yes, I would say in most cases, for me at least, I can't speak for everybody, but for me at least, I find that painting people that I know sometimes comes easier than harder. You know, I think some people would think that it would be more of a challenge, but you know, especially if I'm like painting my wife or something. I painted my grandfather before, and in both cases, it just, for some reason, maybe because I just see them all the time, it just came much easier to me. You know, I always say there's a certain bit of alchemy that comes when you're painting somebody you care about. So, but as far as people that I don't know, you know, there's sometimes that it just comes very easily, and then sometimes it's quite the challenge, and I don't necessarily ever know and can never predict really which one's which. What about y'all?
From painting friends, I think it's both like if you know them really well, then you can really see individuality and character and personality. But then that's also the challenge of having your painting really show that. And sometimes you feel like there's more character in them than what your painting might show. But
yeah.
it's a challenge.
Yeah.
I'll just leave it at that.
Yeah, I feel like it's the same whether they're a stranger or not, unless the fact that they're a stranger makes me feel awkward or nervous or something. In that case, maybe I'd paint worse.
All right, everybody, we're going to take another break here. Another 5 minutes, and we'll go from there. We'll be back shortly. Good, Mom. All right, everybody. I noticed, or it was brought to my attention that my mic was on mute, and so you're only hearing me through Alex's. I'm glad he was so close to me.
I think her name's Monique, says, wishing your mom a very happy birthday.
Oh.
Also, your hat is getting quite a lot of love online right now.
Nice.
And you it would be. It'd be a hit. My mom loves to collect hats, and I was like, you gotta wear it. You gotta bring a hat, Mom, to wear. So glad she did.
Nandini asks, would you say that a brunette or brown color is the best for the beginning of a portrait?
Well, it helps if it's in the same skin tone family, I think. When I'm typically drawing, I like to use something that's a bit lighter, that is more forgiving, so that when I go to the next stage, I can continue to go darker. However, sometimes I think it bites me in the butt when I'm alla prima painting, because once you've put down sort of that light, you have to even put even a heavier amount of dark in order for it to not be, in order to like for it to get dark onto your painting. You ever find that to be an issue?
When you...
So like if I have like a light layer on that's thin, and when I'm alla prima painting, and then adding darker
On
to
top of it.
on top, it sometimes makes it hard to get like a really deep dark.
Oh. I do find that when I'm doing these alla prima things, but I didn't know why. But maybe that is what's going on.
Because those colors are mixing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and it's like wet.
And it's wet, and you know, and so it's for some reason it just seems to something going on there.
So now that you guys are getting some color on, I'm kind of curious to see your thoughts on the shadow that's being cast on her forehead from the hat. It seems like kind of a unique opportunity to sort of explore a temperature shift on the forehead. Is that something that you guys usually find if people are wearing hats, or is that just kind of unique to the lighting?
Like the penumbra shadow on top of her forehead, is that what you were talking about?
Mm-hmm.
Like the temperature.
Oh, the temperature. Yeah, I definitely want to play with like the warmth of that temperature for sure. But they've kind of gotten to color. I'm still working on getting a little bit more of the structure down.
Yeah, I'm definitely seeing a nice warm shadow there. And so I definitely want to try and get that feeling in my painting. And I think it does tend to happen a lot, but it definitely is situational. Because it's a cool light, and probably the light bouncing off of her skin into the shadow is creating it warm, and the hat has like an oranginess to it. So it's a good recipe for a nice warm shadow.
Michael Gallo asks, how do you determine how big to initially make the head when starting?
Oh, that's always a good question. Oftentimes I try to like maybe place the chin, the bottom of the chin, close to the halfway mark if I'm going to add more body to my portrait. And so in this instance, that's what I'm doing. I'm putting her chin, in order to have some of the hat in, I'm putting her chin down at almost the halfway mark of the canvas. However, if you're doing like a much closer up head and shoulders, then I like to try to hit it on the lower third, the chin. But that's just me, and I don't know if that's necessarily like a standard, but I just find that it helps me position my face well. Another thing that I consider when I'm doing a portrait is if they are looking a certain direction, to leave space in the direction that they're looking on your canvas, like a negative space, and that helps sort of the portrait to breathe and be able to have something to look at or look towards, and it helps them not, one of my instructors used to say, it makes them not a prisoner of the canvas, where if you have it so close to the direction they're looking, it almost feels like they're being locked into this rectangle. So I've always kind of kept that in mind since then.
Erica, Andy just said, so happy one of the artists just dropped her paintbrush. I did it twice today.
Somebody might not have noticed. Calling me out.
I'm telling you.
It happens to all of us. Isu Bijang, sorry if I'm mispronouncing that, says, writers spend a lot of time alone mastering their craft, and I reckon it gets pretty lonely. Do you guys get that feeling too? Where you hardly get to see or speak to anyone?
Yes. you know, one of the main reasons I wanted to start East Oaks is because I'm an extreme extrovert in a world that there's actually a lot more introverts, and I need people to be around. It inspires me to be around other artists. It excites me when I see what other people are working on. So community, I think, is paramount and very important. And I think even the most introverted people need interaction with others. And I think there's a certain synergy there. So, absolutely, I think it's very important. But there are other artists that probably, I'm sure, would not find it to be as important as I do. But yes, I find it to be important. Erica, would you like to?
Sure.
Sounds like you were passionate about it too.
No, it's just, it's something that I really enjoyed when I was at Florence Academy, was having that community of students and other painters, teachers, people who valued, you know, we were all valuing our work and really cared about it. And so if you're working by yourself all the time, I think it's sometimes difficult because, you know, if you have any self-doubt or if you have any questions or anything like that, it's like there's no dialogue, there's nowhere for that to channel. And so having a community is really beneficial. Not, you know, we can learn so much from other people, and it's just nice to see how others who value the same thing you do kind of manifest it in their own way.
Yeah, totally.
Andy W. asks, what about starting with transparent brown and terpenoid?
Transparent brown terpenoid work.
Yeah, that would do it. Transparent brown. I wonder how warm that is.
Josh used, and that's like one of his main colors on his palette, or it was at one point. That's a Josh LaRock is who I'm talking about there. He often would use transparent brown. Transparent oxide yellow instead, but that's just a personal preference thing.
I've been using transparent brown on a painting that I'm working on, and I have loved it. I think it's great.
I've never used this from my
What is this brown you speak of?
What is this special thing that I'm missing out on? Will it magically make my paintings better?
Yeah, it's the magic color. You've been missing out this whole time on the magic color.
There it is. That's what I was missing.
It'll make it more brown.
I don't think I need any more of that.
Do you all have any tips for folks tuning in on how to create successful color harmonies now that you guys are starting to lay in some of the skin tones?
Personally, if I'm just thinking about a concept on how to help explain it to people, perhaps a question you can ask yourself is how you can find, if you have one area of the painting and another area of the painting, you can ask yourself how similar those areas are, or maybe you can bring bits of one area into another. For example, if you have a portrait in a background, seeing where there's bits of background in the figure, and then seeing where there's some of the figure, those colors and colors and tones in, and seeing how they can be in the background as well. So finding those two connections. Perhaps others can explain further.
No, that's good.
Yeah.
I like that. No need for more explanation.
Perfect.
Mm-hmm. All right, I'm promising myself that after this next break, I'm actually going to put color on this thing.
This is perhaps a little bit of a cushy question that I came up with. But just, with birthdays, I was kind of like, maybe this is appropriate. What advice would you give to your younger artist self?
This is a question. It sounds like a Divya question. Doesn't it sound like a question Divya would ask, Alex?
Mm-hmm.
It's great. It's a great question. What advice would you give your younger artist self?
Don't be afraid to fail.
Yes.
Just so much of that, and try things, make a mess with the paint. Don't worry about it. That's pretty much it.
There's a saying I have here that in order to paint something, you're going to put something down and it's going to be wrong. It's inevitable because there's no other context to tell you that it's right, And but failure is baked into success, and here, East Oaks, we try to always be constructive and fail forward. So, failing forward is just something that I like to have sort of as a note on my wall. Just to inspire yourself. And Jeffrey T. Larson said one time when he was doing a video with us, be okay to experiment, because if you get it wrong, well, nobody died. And I've always just loved that. If you mess up, nobody's going to die. Just be okay with it and keep on going.
Yeah, that is good advice. Can use it right now.
Yeah.
What advice would I give? Draw more. Draw more, Alex. You will appreciate it later. Just do it. It's funny, when I was first starting, I was not afraid of failing at all. I feel like I am more now.
Do you think it's something that feels like the stakes are higher? And so...
Probably, yeah.
Yeah.
All of a sudden people are watching.
Yeah. You have people all around the world right now watching right now.
Yep. Exactly.
Yeah, but I think that's just such great advice, though. It's just don't be afraid. Also, something I would tell my younger self is to find someone is going to believe in you, that's going to hold you accountable to doing the hard thing. So many times our brains just want us to do the easy thing, and that's just not helpful for learning. So yeah, that's another thing I would say. All right, everybody, take another quick break. We'll get back to it.
Awesome, again, let's go. I'm breathing.
We're back. This is session 4, I believe, right?
Yeah, I think it's close. Yes, it's session 4. It's funny because usually I'm not even able to do session 1, and so usually session 4 I'm putting down color, and even though I had session 1, I'm still at that same stage.
That always happens.
Yeah.
You fill in the time.
Yep.
Marcella asks, do you use warm and cools? For example, a plane turning away from the light might be a cooler color. So I guess that is to say, how can you use temperature to indicate form?
Well, boy, there's a lot in that question to unpack, but I would say that a basic thought to that is that, I'll give you the attorney answer, which it depends. But mostly it deals with the property of light and what's going on with the light. And there's things called like subsurface scattering, where if light's passing through a membrane such as like skin that has like capillaries and blood flowing through it, that it'll change warmth. And so you have to also figure out what the light's bouncing off of in the environment to create reflection. And in that reflection, it might be bouncing off of something warm, which will make a warm shadow that it reflects into. So in almost all cases, as long as you're creating a balance between warm and cool and creating a color harmony among your tones, that is far more important than like just saying, oh, it's going to be warm if it's in this part of the shadow and, and not in this area. There's like 6 different reasons it could be a warm shadow, So does anybody want to riff off of that a little bit?
Well, I could say, like, let's say form, when what I believe you would get taught at like GCA is that as something is falling away from the light, it can, and yes, it depends, get more neutral. And sometimes neutral is seen as cold.
Yep.
Or cool. So the reason it might be looking cool as the turn forms away, or the form turns away, is because it might be becoming more neutral.
Yep. That is true. So when there's less light hitting a form and it's going more neutral, if it was a warm thing, then that means it's going to go cooler. But if it's say it's a blue object, and the form is turning away, then it's actually getting warmer in the sense that in order for something to go neutral, it has to get warmer. So they're both going towards gray, but because our eye see things in different properties, and color is a relationship, all of those things matter. So if they're painting an Avatar person from the movie Avatar, then it's going to get warmer going away. or to the atmosphere of the environment.
Right, yeah. If there's a, you know, green grass in a red barn,
Yep.
then all of that goes out the window.
Exactly. Color is a weird thing, and can do some very interesting things.
Marcella says, thanks, Lewis. That's helpful. Thanks, guys. And Andy W. says, I joined a little late, so my apologies. But are you all using the same palette, or do you have different palettes? Would love to know your colors.
I'm using basically ivory black, cobalt blue, permanent crimson, vermilion, yellow ochre, and white, lead white.
Nice. Yeah, I remember, Louis, you might have told me this, or I don't know if I heard it in person, but Daniel Keyes at like Portrait Society, he ended up just putting his palette on his, like a link on his website, because he was so tired of answering that question. And he would say, just go to my website. And I feel like that would be such a good idea.
Would be a good idea.
It's like, hey, you want to know? Here you go. Full list.
So we are all using our own personal palette colors to answer that part of the question. So, and tonight I'm mainly using raw umber, oxide yellow, oxide red, raw sienna, yellow ochre, and lead and titanium white mixed together, vermilion, alizarin crimson, manganese violet, and French ultramarine blue and cobalt blue. So, but yet again, that it probably would be best for me. Maybe Kelly and I'll talk and make sure that we have like links to what our palettes are on there. That would be a good thing.
Well, that'll be hard. I change mine every one of these sessions.
Shh, nobody will know.
That's true. It'll probably look the same anyway. But I am using raw umber, viridian, ultramarine blue, alizarin crimson, naphthol red, transparent oxide red, yellow ochre, lemon yellow, white, and then this light blue mixture that's just blue mixed with white.
All right.
Danielle Martins says, hello, I'm from Brazil. I would love to know how you guys solve a painting with a more diffused lighting.
Well, I'm assuming kind of similar to what we have today, which is a very diffused light. So right now we're using a 60-inch umbrella lighting, so it's very broad. And you know, I approach it similar to how I approach most anything. It's, even though it's a broad light source, it still has a light most facing plane. So because of that, I like to say that it's the nature of how light falls is still the same. It's just going to happen much softer and more gradual. So the ultimate diffused light source is if you're overcast sky or something, you know, but properties still sort of remain the same, just much softer and much more gradual in its midtones. anyone else is welcome to jump in on that one.
Yeah, I think perhaps just spending some time to understand what your value range is. And if you have something that's more diffused, it might be that your values are just closer together. And so it might not be actually quite as different as something else. You just have a closer range. The properties of, painting, edges, values, all that stuff still apply.
I like it.
So another kind of pertinent yet maybe general question. What are good strategies and conventions to follow when composing a portrait, especially here in the context of an alla prima portrait?
I'm so sorry, Evie, you're gonna have to repeat that because I was concentrating. What? Say that one more time.
What are good strategies or conventions to follow when composing an alla prima portrait?
I think what you mentioned earlier, Lewis, about making sure that if you're looking in a direction that you leave some space. It's not too compressing the face, making it feel claustrophobic. And so, having things a little off-centered and enough where you give a little breathing room to the model. I think rule of thirds is another thing to keep in mind, some general rules. I mean, not rules, but guidelines.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah, I feel like I could have tried to think about some of those conventions, but I just didn't. Probably would have helped.
I'm always surprised at how much fun this is. Every time I do it, I don't know why it surprises me, but you get down and you're like, oh, why don't we just do this every night? Yes, most of us here are indirect painters, and so like when you're so used to painting indirectly, and all of a sudden it's almost like you get to do something against the rules a little bit,
We should host like an East Oaks alla prima painting marathon.
Yes, sounds good. I like it. It's one of those things I also have to be like, I know how much I want to paint this flower on the top of the hat, but I've actually got to do the portrait first.
Yeah, I think that's something that Lewis and I were talking about earlier, is how a lot of art students really want to jump into drawing details and defining the features a little bit too early in the process, and then they kind of dig themselves into a hole. If something is not placed correctly or a measurement is off, or a tilt is wrong, then you end up having to go back and undo a lot of hard work. So is there like any advice that you all have for people on how to develop that sense of restraint?
Honestly, I feel like Alex does an incredible job. I still bounce around probably more than I should, but I sometimes look over and go, man, his focus.
What?
Yeah, his focus to stay in that little area and keep working on that little area.
Yeah, I don't know what you're talking about.
Well, it's the truth. Truth the way
I would
see it.
write notes and stick them on my easel, or write it on my board, or drawing board or something. Very
I do the same thing. I have so many sticky notes at home.
anything to help.
Great. Time to put some color down. This is supposed to be a color portrait, right? No.
Although that could be an interesting idea to do a monochromatic portrait study night.
Should have an East Oaks paint from life, night, and one of the challenges be it has to be monochromatic. I actually love painting monochromatic portraits. I think it probably goes back to just because I enjoy drawing, and so it kind of feeds that. There's like a warm, cool vibration you can create in your monochromatic things that is always interesting to me.
So, Lewis, looking at how you just scraped your palette, do you have any tips for people on how to keep your palette organized while you're working?
Yeah. It's like one of my favorite topics. I organize my palette in sort of a color spectrum. Yellow, I have the most yellows, and they're highly chromatic and high in value, which means they're lighter. And then I have it wrap around to darker and much stronger chromatic, which chromatic is just another way of saying highly saturated color. And as they wrap around, they go from yellow to red to violet, blue, green. And at the bottom, I have my darkest colors that are also the lowest in chroma. So they're like more in the brown range, but I have like transparent oxide red, which is my red. I sort of still have a red, yellow, blue. The blue is black, and my yellow is a raw umber, and then my red is oxide red. And so those are like the lower values and less chromatic ones. And so when I paint with all of my high values and light values up at the top and create a scale of most chromatic notes, and it goes down to darker colors and less chromatic or less saturated color. Hopefully that made sense.
Yeah, I think palette organization is, well, I've definitely benefited from your organizational skills this week. Lewis helped me a lot kind of overhaul my palette and sort of redo the orientation of it. And it really was immensely helpful in just seeing the accuracy of what colors you're mixing.
I think that, you know, in our tutorial videos, we have like the palette close up and we go into much deeper detail with that. We don't have our palettes as shown here just because we don't have enough camera angles to get everybody and the palettes perfectly in. So we would need 6 cameras to do something like that. So it doesn't happen, but in our tutorial videos, we have a very accurate close-up shot of both of our palette and everything else. So if ever y'all are interested, y'all can go to eStoke Studio and check that out. And we explain how it's like an instrument scale and you're going up and down the scale in order for things to work.
I think this is something that perhaps many artists struggled with during the pandemic. Do you have any experience with artist block? And if so, like, do you have any ideas or recommendations on how to motivate yourself out of it? I know many friends who are artists who have struggled quite a bit with this.
Is that one of those situations like, not just me, but I know a guy? Just speaking for a friend.
Yeah, you know, totally not me ever.
I mean, I think this is probably a really great question for Erica and Alex because they deal with creating more poetic work when I actually do more commission work. So my artist block doesn't happen as much because I know the next thing I have to go to. So I'm going to throw it up to them.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely felt it. Especially after a big show, I feel it, and then like towards the end of a show, and it's really, for me, means I'm just feeling a bit burnt out and I need to just live life a little and just be re-inspired to paint. But also sometimes if you hold on to that feeling for too long and don't act, then you second guess everything that that you want to do, and you just kind of end up paralyzed. So there was a quote on the inside of my little oats thing the other day that said, "Action feeds motivation." And sometimes
I just watched a video on that the other day.
Yeah. I mean, it's so true. I mean, sometimes you just have to do something, and then sometimes a better idea will come in the middle of the thing that you're doing, and you can stop that and act on the thing that you actually want to do. But sometimes too much time to think is the worst.
I always think of that Chuck Close quote, which is, "Inspiration is for amateurs." The rest of us do, and I feel like that ties right into the action. Because once you get going, like you said, you get more ideas and you get more inspired. So it's good stuff.
Yeah, that's actually like one of my favorite art quotes of all time. Because it's true. It's really true. Amos Mars says, I seem to just use the first brush I pick up until I need to do details with the smaller brush. How do you choose what brush to use? Thank you.
Personally, I try to, as much as I can, pick a brush that coordinates with the plane that I'm trying to paint. I don't always do it, but it's something I try to do.
That's good.
For example, if I'm painting a background, I don't want to use my tiny brush. And then if I'm painting something, I don't want to have to fight. Like if I can get it efficient and where I just put something down and it's clean and not fussy, that's really nice. Again, I should practice what I preach.
Yeah, it really comes after so many hours of experience of what brush does what. And then you realize, yeah, this brush lays paint down better. This brush is better for when there's already a layer down, and it's okay if some of the paint gets picked up. So,
Yeah. I also think that, that's just a good place to just experiment, because you'll find that since they do have different properties, that you'll have happy accidents and discover interesting things that happen, and then you'll end up having preference on things because of how they actually operate. So I'm thinking like, Stephen Assail and Jeff Hine use a fan brush for most of their beginning of their painting, because it creates this variety that's just very interesting to them. And, I know that at least Jeff had a period where he had a hiatus from being a professional painter, where he's like, I just not excited about how I'm painting, and I want to take 2 years off and just practice different things. And that was when he learned that he loved that, because he didn't feel the pressure of being unable to experiment, which I found to be really, really interesting. So I say make sure you just give yourself the liberty to discover.
Sometimes the right tool to get a certain plane or effect or whatever is not even a brush. Maybe it's a palette knife, maybe it's a paper towel, maybe it's a really cheap brush. So I think that taking time, though, when you're painting, to look at your tools and seeing like how they're working, what are these brush strokes, and trying to find variety, I think is a useful thing to do.
Have any of you guys ever tried to make your own brushes out of curiosity?
I've not, no.
I have not, but Evie, I feel like that sounds like something right down your alley.
I can teach y'all. It's a lot of fun.
Now, the closest I've done is that when Rosemary was in town one time at GCA, they did like a demo, and I sort of tied just the brush hairs together. But I didn't put them in a ferrule or complete the project. It was just sort of a fun demonstration they were doing to show everybody how hard it was. But that's the closest I've gotten to doing that, which is not very close at all.
oh yeah, when I just taught at Rosemary Brushes, they had a surprise for me, where I had to try and make a brush in front of all the students so that they could see me be bad at something.
Like, thanks, guys.
And
That's so sweet of you.
Yeah, I had no idea I was doing it, and I sucked. It was so hard to do, at least the way they do it. And it was sable, just like the softest hair. I couldn't even pick it up.
Yeah, it's such a soft hair.
It's for you, whoever commented on my brush dropping.
Brush down. Thelina Kitalawa says, what do you guys think about Scott Waddell's painting style? Recently I saw him on Instagram. His method seems very strange.
We said Scott Waddell. How about, that's the question we'll pick up right after the break. The bell just went off, and so we'll carry on after that. Sound good?
To be continued.
To be continued.
Perfect. That's a... All right, everybody, we are back for our next session. Thanks so much for watching.
All right, so go back to that question, Evie, that you were asking.
Selena asks, what do you guys think about Scott Waddell's painting style? Recently I saw him on Instagram. His method seems very strange.
So
Not
Scott,
actually familiar with his method. I don't know it, so maybe if somebody could explain briefly why it would be strange.
well, partially I think he has a process that feels very sort of window shading style, where you kind of finish as you go.
Okay, yeah.
But also, yeah, Scott Waddell is one of my instructors, so know him pretty well. And so his whole process is in the school of thought of form modeling. And at Grand Central Atelier, one of the things that they really sort of honed in on was understanding how to conceptualize form, creating a three-dimensional object on a two-dimensional plane through the process of actually sculpting in space. And it was sort of a mental exercise that they would try to have you go through. And so Scott, I think, was probably the person who took it the furthest as far as how he in his own unique way, how he approaches form. But I will say he was probably one of the best form instructors that GCA ever had. I respect Scott's style. It's most certainly not a style that I personally want to paint, but it is most certainly one that I have respect for.
Yeah, I actually really like his method, and just how straightforward and logical it is. Yeah. Sometimes, like, if I ever watch one of his things, I'm like, that looks nice. It all makes sense.
Mhm.
Everything he's doing
Yep.
makes
There's a science to
sense.
it for sure.
Yeah.
And a legitimately science. A lot of his process also is things that like Pixar animators are trained on to understand how to create properties of water and form on people and light. And I think he likes to draw from that too. So
I watched one recently where he's just like painting something and he's just talking, and he's like, I am painting from a photo. Don't tell my former employer. And he's talking about Jacob.
Yep. That's really funny.
And I just thought that was hilarious.
Yeah, that's a big no-no at GCA when I was there. I may have gotten caught once or twice painting from a photo. By none other than Mr. Jacob himself.
Oh, and in the video, he talks about his time at Florence Academy.
Oh, does he?
Mm-hmm, because he went there for like a year first.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah, me neither. And the way he describes it is so funny. And he like describes his impression of Daniel Graves, and I'm like, wow, just going out there, and it's funny.
That's awesome.
I recommend it.
Check that out.
I'm going to say this is more of a color study. That's what it is.
It's gotten really quiet all of a sudden. All right, everybody, I've got to bring in some more questions. It's one of those things where, like, when people ask questions, I'm like concentrating. I'm like, oh, I don't know if I can answer this question. But then when there's no questions, I'm like, guys?
Thelina says, it's 5:19 in the morning here in Sri Lanka. I wanted to wake up on time, but the alarm didn't quite work. Thank you so much for waking up so early and joining us. That's awesome.
We truly
Yeah.
appreciate it. It's an honor to be able to be a part of your morning coffee and morning routine. Or maybe you're a tea drinker.
There you go.
My mom is the tea drinking queen. When we go home, she has in her kitchen almost a leaning tower of tea options that we get to choose from.
I just finished a cup of green tea.
Look at you. If I had green tea right now, I'd be up all night.
Me too.
Yeah, I hope that doesn't happen.
Yeah, for your sake, I hope that to be true too.
I thought it would help me paint.
Yeah.
Didn't.
I think I hear our sweet little dog Rosie above us, getting excited maybe about going for a walk. So my wife and I have a precious, precious dog that has now become the mascot of East Oak Studio, named Rosie. One of these days, we're going to have her on camera and painting her. She's the sweetest thing.
Lewis, you were talking a second ago about kind of like the taboo of painting from photo references at GCA. Could you maybe extrapolate on that a little bit and explain what some of the differences are in how our eye kind of perceives a photo versus what we're perceiving in life?
Sure. So one of the things, somebody said it a while back and I really like the way they said it. It's not that a photograph is not truthful, but it only gives you one particular truth. It gives you a particular truth, and you know, life, painting from life gives you a lot of other other truths that just don't exist or are omitted in the world of photography. Now, I will say photography has gotten worlds better from what it was, especially because you can operate with raw photos and you can tease out some of those truths. But you know, one of the ways I've heard it said also is, you know, imagine yourself going to the Grand Canyon and you take a picture of the Grand Canyon and you go home and you say, oh, you know, oh, that photo just doesn't do it justice. Well, it's because it's lacking some of the experience of what your eye is capable of seeing in person. And so some of those, for example, is your eyesight is binocular vision, and a photo is monocular vision. So it's coming from one light source. And your brain is so powerful and incredible that it takes you two different vantage points and puts them together to construct a three-dimensional visual perception of what you're seeing in your mind. So because of that, you're already at a disadvantage using a camera because your eye just doesn't compute a flat image the same way it does using both of its eyes looking around a three-dimensional object. Secondarily, our eyes are capable of adjusting quite quickly to ranges of color. And so we basically have high dynamic range built straight into our ability to see. And so we see color in a way that a photograph just isn't capable of doing it because it has to pick a certain range and stick with it. So if you're thinking about a light meter, what a light meter is doing is adjusting itself to a certain range where the maximum color is going to be on one level of light source, where our eye is capable of looking at different positions and receiving different colors on different light sources all at once. So it allows for us to see things much more colorfully if your eye is trained to see them. So that's a number two reason. I could continue going. There's perspective reasons. Perspective can be warped, and camera lenses also can warp an image. Now your eye are camera lenses too, so you can try to mimic what your eye sees if you're using the correct lens at the right vantage point, but it's much harder to do. So you can avoid these pitfalls by understanding or training yourself in life. And then you're able to see clues of the things that you know exist in life in a photo, even though it lacks a whole spectrum of the truth. And so you're able to like fill in the gaps because of your education. That's just another loaded question. So anybody else want to take up the baton on that one?
That was a good answer.
Gail asks if anybody's going to include her arms.
We have a little like suggestion of the shoulder and maybe some of her arm, but I still have so much work to do on the face. I'm probably not going to spend too much time in that area.
Right now at this stage, I'm hoping to include her lips. Yet again, I'm like Erica. If I can get myself that far down that quickly, then I will. I have a feeling I'm going to be playing around with this portrait for the next day or so. So I'm sure at the end of this portrait, I'll be including a little bit of the arms.
Delina asks, is the blue rubber glove distracting with the context of color?
I've gotten used to it. It doesn't bother me. Sorry for you guys if it's distracting.
That's funny. I didn't even notice it.
You know, it's something on previous Painting from Life I said, I use lead white and I usually wear gloves, and then every time I was here I never wore gloves. And so I wanted to demonstrate that, yes, I do.
Yeah, I think I laud you for your good health and safety practices. I should wear gloves more when I paint, but I guess I'm a little bit more like Lewis and Alex, and I tend not to.
So I always mean to, but then all of a sudden, it's the last thing I think about when I'm actually getting everything ready, because it's not in my habit loop.
Joe Ellen says, I look forward to this every month. I love painting with all of you.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah.
We look forward to doing them, that's for sure. It is for sure. I'm looking forward to seeing all the people who are painting along and y'all posting on East Oaks what you're working on. It's always like one of my highlights to see what everyone's doing.
Yeah, that's a great reminder to everybody painting along. Please share photos of your work with us. We would love to see it. And there was a question earlier that I missed accidentally that I think at this stage is a little bit more pertinent. Zaid asked, how do you paint hair? I find it so difficult to paint. Any advice would be appreciated.
Abbreviation is your friend, and using a larger brush is your friend, because you can use the hair of that brush to kind of when you make the stroke, it actually, and do it in the direction of the hair, it'll help it feel hair-like without having to feel like you have to paint every strand. That would be my quick thought. Also to think about as the highlights of hair are like a ribbon. So they go in the opposite direction or perpendicular to the grain of the hair. That's always helpful to know.
It's helpful too when you're looking at highlights for the hair, for example, shape-wise, seeing how they mimic the skull, and in describing the skull underneath, sometimes we get caught up in the shapes of the hair, but if we don't look at the bigger form that it's actually sitting on top of, sometimes things look too generic or something looks a little off and we don't really know why. And so seeing how structurally the shapes mimic the skull is really useful.
Yeah.
Thelina says, Lewis, please upload something on your Instagram. I didn't see any update there for a while. Alex is the best kind of Insta guy, I must say.
I love it.
Hey.
Yes, I got to get better at that. I am the worst when it comes to posting on Instagram. And I promise to do better than I already do now. Which it's such a necessary thing these days, and I really don't give it the credit that it is due. You're not the first person who's asked me to do this too. I recently had Portrait Sync was like, you know what? I'm trying to find new work to post of you Portrait Society, and I was like, well, I think I might need to put something up there. So. All right, everyone. Well, we're taking another break, and we will be back shortly.
All right, guys. In the meantime, please go ahead and submit your questions that you may have, and we'll get those answered.
It's one of those moments where like, okay, this is for all the marbles.
This is for all the marbles.
Yeah. I gotta make something happen. Yeah.
High stakes painting time. Gail asks, I've received the reference photos for a portrait class I'm taking. What preparatory drawing would you all recommend before class starts next Wednesday? There are 5 views.
I think drawing, maybe sketching, maybe getting pretty limited value range, but maybe understanding the general relationship of, for example, jaw to mouth to nose to eyes, to forehead, understanding that general arrangement, that structure. That could be something you can study before getting started.
Yeah, that sounds good. I'm not sure I have much to add. It's kind of a hard question for me.
I guess it depends on what the portrait course is about. Then, but I'm just thinking if it's portrait painting, any kind of drawing is probably helpful.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely taking some time to do preparatory drawings is a beneficial practice to be in. Lakshan asks, why is everyone using yellowish painting ground? Even the model looks much into the red in hue. This could be in part, I'm not sure what kind of monitor you're viewing this on, but oftentimes different computer monitors actually have a tendency to tweak the colors a little bit, so that could be in part what you're seeing.
Maybe it's talking about the imprimatura or the stain. We all have a
yellowish
similar
stain.
I made mine with raw umber and ivory black. It's something that we did for our like cast paintings, and so back in my school days, so I just kind of did it. Something relatively neutral for me to paint on top of is my thinking.
Yeah, like a warm neutral tends to be nice.
I enjoy painting on different colors of imprimatur just to see what happens, but if I'm doing flesh tones, it's like they're very difficult in and of themselves, so if I have something neutral, then it makes it a little bit easier for me to judge.
Does the tone of your imprimatura like have a really heavy impact on your color choices later on in the stage, or is it more just kind of like a setup thought process?
For a portrait, any painting, if I leave it behind, it shouldn't, like it can still work in the painting. For example, like I have a gap between my brush strokes and there's the imprimatura showing through, like, you know, it's nice if it still works with the painting, it isn't distracting. So I try to keep it light enough where it's not like a really saturated color that's distracting. I don't know if that exactly answers the question, but
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, that's my thing. If it's too dark, it does tend to mess with my colors a bit. And I can get it where I want it, it just might take longer.
mm-hmm. And then for, you know, an exercise like this, where I only have one day to do it, I don't really want to be messing around with that.
Yeah, I'm always really impressed by the people who choose not to do an underpainting or imprimatura at all and are just somehow able to like magically nail it anyways. It's just all of our brains work differently, and you know, because of that, everybody is a different painter.
Yeah. Definitely. I think all of us gotten into that, you know, the final countdown mode where all of a sudden we're like, it's hard for us to even answer questions. At least that is for me.
Yeah, that question, if you know the person, is it easier? Right now, if I didn't know the person, I wouldn't be so upset that it doesn't look good. Because I really wanted to.
Oh.
The pressure's on people.
Oh.
Well, like she said, she's going to be here a couple of days, so.
Yeah. I might have to look
I'm
at
banking
those
on it, man.
reference images.
I'm really curious to see like the more you guys develop, how you're all choosing to have kind of like different textural variation between the flesh on the face and like the feather flower on the hat and like the weave of it, and it's just very interesting to see like how you're using texture to communicate.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that goes into like the edge hierarchy thing I was talking about. I have a lot of fun with that.
Yeah, the texture on mine is that the hat is just non-existent, so it's the texture of the canvas at the moment. So, but it'll get
Invisible
there.
hat.
Yeah, my separation is invisible hat.
to say I did a decent portrait of a hat.
So it is my favorite hat.
So there you go. I did something.
That was good. I like that.
Ken McIntosh says, hello from San Jose, California. Love the painting so far, and the model is really great. Do you have posted anywhere what streaming equipment you're using?
No, but it's we use a platform called Sling Studio. A lot of people use OBS. Sling Studio, I will say, is not doing a very good job of keeping themselves to date. I actually think OBS is probably a better platform. But if you want to get into it affordably, that Sling Studio is by far the most affordable platform you can use to get kind of into it.
Hey Louie, could you jiggle with the cord on your mic? There's like some weird static.
Oh, okay. How's that? Is that better? Okay.
Perfect. Thank you.
Yep.
I am definitely not an audio engineer, you guys, so sorry for any technical difficulties.
Yeah, we are most certainly just keeping in the, we're amateurs here, but we don't let that stop us so that we can reach out to y'all.
And Ken, to answer your other question about the cameras and mics, yeah, we have multiple cameras going at the moment and many different mics, which, you know, that's some of the issues, and there's a learning curve there. We'll get better.
There's always a learning curve, that's for sure.
Shannon asks, if you could choose between flowers, ocean, or mountains to paint as the background to a figure, what would you choose and why?
Flowers.
Ocean or mountain?
It feels like a personality test.
Yeah, it really does.
In a fun way.
Like artist horoscope.
Yeah.
Man, I don't even know.
I kind of want to say flowers because like a flower background sounds super interesting. I think of that alma tadema.
Yeah. Yeah, that alma tadema painting is something, it's just crazy. Yeah, I'd probably say flowers too. You know, you don't want to get so like epic sometimes with your backgrounds that it takes away from the figure. I feel like there's a soft balance between making sure that one's not competing with the other but supporting the other. So I'm always wondering about where that balance is and where it exists. And so, like, you know, if I'm doing a mountain range, you know, I wouldn't want it to just like overpower the figure.
Yeah, I was thinking about that with ocean,
Mhm.
getting waves and everything, and how, as beautiful as that would be, how would I make sure that it was secondary to
Yeah.
the figure? But that sense of space is really cool. Like,
Yeah.
all of that distance, that would be really fun.
It would be.
I mean, I want to see y'all like create like Kehinde Wiley backgrounds one of these days. So another kind of fluff question I came up with. What are some of your favorite historical portraits and why? What are the things that you love about them?
Think about that for a second, but I feel like I know I have one.
A historical portrait.
Like, how are you defining a historical portrait? Like, does it have to be like of somebody specific, or just a painting from the past?
No, I guess I just mean like anything pre-modern,
Yeah, okay.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
I was thinking like of a president, or like as a historical portrait, or like
Oh,
of a.
that's another.
I don't know if
That's
my.
another interesting question too.
I don't know if I have enough knowledge to be able to say for that question, but let me think about the portrait one for a while.
I think I know one. So there's a French painter named Messinier who has done several Napoleon scenes. He was in that era, and he makes these tiny. Now he did large paintings too. There's a large one that he did in the Met, but he makes these tiny little gem paintings, the portraits that are just incredibly small, but every little portrait in them, even though they're the size of a half of a dime, are so beautiful that you just can't stop staring at them. And there's one that's in the Musée d'Orsay of Napoleon's army marching through the snow. And it is, I could just stare at it. The painting's no larger than maybe 2 postcards, or maybe even less than that. But I could stare at it all day.
When I was in art school, I actually had the pleasure of getting to meet Amy Sherald, who did Michelle Obama's presidential portrait. And yeah, I was just thinking, Erica, about what you said of like contemporary sort of historical. I was like, oh, that might be mine.
Yeah, look at that. She live in New York, right? Is that right?
Yeah, she's in New York now. She used to be with the Reinhardt School of Painting at MICA.
Okay. Well, that's cool to have met her.
All I know about her is that she was an Odd Nerdrum student at one point.
Really? Was she really?
Mm-hmm.
I never knew that. Interesting.
Yeah.
That Odd Nerdrum family.
Which clearly, I mean, she paints a lot different than Odd Nerdrum
Yeah.
now.
Oh, wow. Very different from Odd.
Yeah, I was going to say that surprises me just because they're so different.
Yeah.
I think maybe there's a good lesson in that, though, that, you know, you don't have to emulate everything that your teachers are giving you. Rather, you just add them to your toolbox and you can build your own style upon it.
Totally.
Honestly, that's one of the best lessons you can learn from having some sort of instructor.
Is this the last session or the second?
Second to last, thank goodness.
Okay, because I'm.
That's all right, I'll wiggle a second.
Okay.
That's fine.
Move my eyes a minute.
No, we have 16 more sessions after this. And
But
I'm losing track of time here.
in this session, we have 45 seconds left, so
Okay, here. Go, go, go.
yeah.
So I'm going to throw you a curveball in these last few seconds and ask, when you're in a position like this where you have to make really, really quick decisions, what are some of the things going through your head?
I'm totally going to screw this up.
This is gonna be good. Perfect timing.
honesty.
Oh.
Okay, this neck's gotta go this way for a few minutes.
All right, everybody, we'll be back in just a bit.
So during this final session, what are some of the things that you guys are thinking you might want to prioritize? Like, what's the thought process behind that?
Do I want to fix what's wrong, or do I want to have a pretty finished or a pretty painting? So it's like I'm seeing a major drawing issue, but I'm like, do I put the mouth in just so I have something finished, or do I try and fix drawing issues? That's what I'm thinking.
Not too far from that. Most certainly, I'm like, mouth needs to go in. Because I haven't gotten the mouth really in yet. But I felt like I had to get other things in position in order for the mouth to be right. You know, like Sargent would always say, there's just something in the lips. And it's just so easy to get that wrong if everything else is off. So the goal is to get the mouth in, and then like my thing is softening the color and cleaning the color up is something else that I want to do. You know, getting edges in properly.
Try to step back at this stage and see what is standing out to me the most,
Yep.
what's bothering me the most, and do that.
Yeah, that's smart.
How often do you guys tend to squint when you're working on a alla prima portrait like this?
I squint, I use the mirror, like do the whole thing.
I think it's more like
Blur
how
my
often do I
eyes, yeah.
actually open my eyes to a normal degree.
Yeah, totally.
I'm always squinting. Michael Klein would always be like, yeah, I never squint. And I'm like, well, that's you, Michael. You know?
And then also, if you like watch his videos carefully, he squints.
He squints, he just
Secret
doesn't
squinting.
doesn't like think he's doing it. Secret squinter.
We've got you figured out, Michael, in case you're watching.
Just anything to help me not zoom into a detail without seeing how it works in context.
Mm-hmm.
So whatever tool that you can use for that.
I forget who said this, but I've heard kind of the saying before that, you know, especially when you're alla prima painting, the last brush strokes that you make are the most important because they're the first ones that somebody's going to see. So is that kind of like an alla prima sort of philosophy that you guys believe in or are approaching, or is that just kind of like a different, you know, individual style?
I've never thought of that.
I mean, it makes sense because if your last strokes you're putting down maybe are the sharpest, and so, or clearest, so maybe that's what's drawing your attention. I could see that.
And yeah, and they're on top,
Mm-hmm.
so I can see it.
I think Sergeant would always say, you know, in the final stage, you're hiding the struggle.
Yeah.
And so I think that kind of goes in alignment with what you're all talking about. Yeah, I think in this last stage, we're trying to find a little bit more color cohesion is something I'm thinking about too, because my colors are a little all over the place at the moment.
What are some strategies that you find helpful for that? Like, do you mean that you're trying to like neutralize more of the colors together, or what does that mean?
A little bit. I think that it's probably a combination of like neutralizing some of the crazy colors a little bit with some of the combinations that I already have out on the palette. And let's see, what's another? Probably mainly just that. I find that I'm like kind of bouncing too much and need to just go in and paint over some of these harsh colors.
I realize I take more shortcuts towards the end where like something needs to get darker, I'm just grabbing raw umber.
Yeah.
And then
Yeah.
sometimes it actually works.
Yeah,
I'm like,
yeah, exactly. It might actually make it better.
yeah, why don't I do this more often?
Yeah. I actually have found that just doing these so many, that with the final stages, I find myself making better abbreviated decisions. Now, sometimes that's not true, but in a lot of cases, I find that I'm like, oh, I should have just done that at the beginning, and then, you know, gone from there.
Yeah, it's really interesting to see all of the, as you said, abbreviated decisions that you're making, because the way that you all are trying to like sort of resolve everything right now, it requires such a degree of careful analysis and restraint, but also bravery at the same time. And it's just like a really, really delicate balance.
Honestly, I think some of it is just trusting your instincts too, that you start letting going on some sort of autopilot of things that you've done in the past. And then I'm finding, oh, I was trying to over control when I should have just been trusting my training a bit.
Yeah, sometimes self-confidence is the most important brush that you can paint with.
Tell you what, though, this model is a statue.
Top notch.
Tell you. Can't blame it on her. So many times, like, you're in class and you're like, oh, the model is just moving so much. Can't say that here.
I think she's got that birthday magic going on.
That's it.
Out of curiosity, have any of the three of you ever modeled for a portrait before?
I've modeled several times. I even modeled for a painting from life one time. When Carmen Gordon painted with y'all, that was a lot of fun. She has a lot of good stuff to say.
And I think Lisa was drawing.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, Lisa was drawing. She did an awesome
Yeah, I remember it being really
awesome
good.
portrait.
Lisa Downey.
Look her up, ladies and gentlemen. Lisa, hope you're watching.
Oh, I love her work.
Yeah.
Could you say her last name again?
Lisa Downey?
Yeah, Downey. Downey. Get down with the downy. Is that the sound of your paintbrush?
Yep.
Whistling.
That's exactly right. The whir of my paintbrush flying through the air.
So now that we're kind of getting into the finishing touches, I wanted to ask something that I think a lot of painters tend to actually not really talk about is signature. And I know a lot of people who sign their work kind of just like the way that they normally write their name, and then a lot of people who have a very very well designed or perhaps even over designed sometimes signature. And I wanted to ask the three of you what you think the most important element of the design of a signature is.
Ooh. That it doesn't get in the way of the painting.
And like, yeah, don't make your signature look better at your painting.
Yeah, it looks so fancy.
Yeah, or distracting that you end up looking at the signature and not the painting. I mean, I think it just depends, like, you know, what you like in a painting, what you care about, you know, your identity, how you want to express it. I think that there isn't necessarily a rule. Some people have like a system of how they do it. I don't know. I just signed the painting, and I try to have the colors at least coordinate with the painting. It's something I looked at Monet and how he signed his paintings, and they seemed to like they had his name so you could see who it was, but it kind of corresponded to the other mixtures that were in the painting, so you weren't like looking at the signature, yet the name was still present.
Yeah, I did a similar thing. I like looked at a couple artists that I really liked their signature, and eventually mine, like sort of, I guess, designed it over time. But it's definitely was not how I used to sign, you know, a check or something, which was hideous.
You're doing great. All right, now it's kind of one of those things like, how much do I want to? Do y'all ever think like, okay, I can do this like one thing over here on the side, right here at the end, and then like, are scared you're just gonna like totally screw up the whole thing?
Oh yeah.
Yep, okay, good.
At the very end is,
That's the scariest.
yeah.
Yeah.
Because then you could make a mark that you have to spend the rest of the time fixing.
Yep. Good, glad I'm not alone on that.
Yeah.
I don't know, I just like can't relate.
Yeah.
You're like, no, I got this.
Perfect.
This is easy.
Andy says, model has been great and your paintings are wonderful. Love these sessions. Thank you.
Tanya, thank you. Well, tomorrow I can't wait to paint some of the hat.
Joyce says, very beautiful all. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
It's these final few moments where I feel like I'm watching like sports or something. Feels very very dramatic and athletic somehow.
I just keep having it in my head, it's the final countdown.
Oh my gosh.
Da-da-da-dun. Da-da-dun. All right, everyone. So glad that you joined us this evening. Put it on the wide angle. So glad that y'all joined us this evening. And thank you to my mother on her birthday for posing.
Yeah.
And thank you everyone for joining. We truly appreciate it. Make sure that y'all post any of your work and tag East Oak Studio in it. And keep, if you want to be a part of our mailing list, if you put your email in for the photos, it will also put you on our mailing list. And so you'll get our newsletter on when we're doing more of these Painting from Life so that you can join us. And thank you, Evie, for spending this evening helping us behind the switcher. And we look forward to seeing y'all. We're getting close to 30, Painting from Life 30. We're 2 away. We're going to try, we'll see about doing something really special on that night where we do something a lot of fun. So, all right, everyone, we'll have a wonderful evening and we'll talk to you soon.
Well done.